So let me give you one more little piece of information to kind of fit the puzzle together. When the forest in its natural state, before, we use the term settlement a lot, European settlement, meaning not Europeans from Europe, but people of European origin, as opposed to Native Americans living in an area. And so that's around this 1880s time period. So before that, you had these open forests. If the forest is open, that is to say, if the trees aren't all packed in, the trees are a little more spread out, then what's going to be on the surface of the ground?
Brush.
Brush, grass, things like that. And so in this semi-arid climate, lots of lightning storms, we always have this pre-monsoonal pattern where it gets real dry, like in May and June, that's when we have our big fire seasons. Lightning storms come with the start of the monsoons. People, also Native Americans or not, setting fires, burning through a lot of that grass. And one of the things that happened in the Southwest, all over the Southwest and certainly in northern Arizona, was the introduction of large herds of livestock. Up in this part of town, in the Fort Valley area, just a little ways up the road, in 1876, a sheep herding company was established. And the reason that people could kind of expand beyond just a few animals for their own personal household was really the railroad that made it possible to, so it's a connection to global economy, basically. When you have a way to sell resources on this national and international network, then all of a sudden it becomes profitable to do something. You don't want to raise 1,000 sheep just for yourself, but if you can sell those products, then it becomes worth a lot. So we had very high herds of livestock, ate the fuels, fires didn't spread, and then we started suppressing fires. And then we developed things like the Forest Service, the Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, created all these firefighters and so on. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show, and I was wondering, Dove, if you might want to talk a little bit about the Ponderosa Peak book as a means of telling this story to kids.
Well,
Can you give it to
yeah.
You have an example too?
No.
But you said you were using this in the camp.
Yeah, we used it this summer. Well, there's a group on campus called the Ecological Restoration Institute, and I believe they helped with this. Ponderosa Peak is basically a story of an old ponderosa pine, and there are illustrations in it to help kids understand how the different time periods, like Pete was talking about. And from what I understand, you guys are basically following kind of the plot of this book for your script. So have you guys all read the book?
I just gave it to Mr. Levin today. So
Oh, okay.
You just got a copy.
Gotcha. Well, I haven't read the book since this summer, so I'm not super good on the specifics either. But I would recommend you guys just all reading it and then kind of trying to break it up into the different time periods like he was talking about. So that way you guys possibly have like a timeline for your script for how you want to break it up in the different time periods of like the fire suppression like he was talking about, and then there's a portion where it talks about the grazing and that portion of it. If I would have known, I would have read the book again, so I could have explained it a little bit better. But it's just, it helps kids picture it better, and I think that's basically what you guys are trying to do through your script. So.
Doesn't it have like a squirrel or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Talking to
there's.
the tree?
Yes. The squirrel and the tree talk to each other, and the tree tells the squirrel the story. I read it this morning because I hadn't read it in a long time either. So the tree tells, he's a big yellow ponderosa pine, and he tells the squirrel the story of how the forest used to be historically and the progression of the forest becoming very unhealthy, and what we have to do to restore the health of the forest, which is called ecological restoration. And we do it through science, and science is a really important element of what we're trying to convey to the children. We also have elements, a couple other elements that are not in there, and that would, well, there is about the crown fire, it is in there, but we really want to convey wildfire safety, and especially campfire safety, and how to make sure it's really out. And I even thought of a rap song at the end about campfire safety and flash flood safety, but I don't know, but I was imagining that.
We should do
Okay.
it for
I thought that would be so cool, you know, rap song at the end for those two elements of what we're trying to convey. We do have a scope of work, and Mr. Levin does have it, and there are bulleted points in it.
They have.
Right, and I think Mr. Levin, initially he thought, oh my God, I have to do this all in an hour. I said, no, but it all flows, one flows into the other. So I also want to introduce Karen Malice Clark, and Karen Malice Clark is from the United States Forest Service. It's nice enough to come over here as well.
Sorry,
And,
traffic thing today.
Oh, that's okay. And Karen actually is the public information officer, and she does a lot of education. And so Karen is here. I think Karen, you can also, I'd like to let you talk a little bit. And then Karen is probably going to help us too. We're going to do a pre and post exercise in the classrooms in the elementary schools. So before they see the production, they're going to have a lesson. They're going to see the production, and then really an incredible program. And Karen has a lot of information more on those educational elements. But Karen, this is the creative writing class. So they're going to be writing the script. So anything, you know, that you would like to interject or add, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I always enjoy a good history lesson, and Pete tells it so well. I'm actually a resource. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I actually used to be a classroom teacher. I taught math and science, had a brief career as a teacher, kind of carried some of that interest and skills into my job now with the Forest Service as a communicator. I do specialize in fire information. So I was really busy this past summer during the Schultz fire. And I'm not a forester, and I'm really not a scientist. Although I've taken a lot of classes, so I've really enjoyed learning about the conditions of the forest, you know, as a learner myself, and then being able to tell other people. How many of you were in the Flagstaff School District for 6th grade? Do anybody remember me from Camp Colton? Maybe. I wore a green outfit. And probably did some fun activities. Hopefully those of you who remember what xylem and cambium are, maybe you learned that or have some familiarity with one of the activities I do. I also do a lot of fire education too. So if you remember the fire triangle, maybe that was from a Camp Colton program. Little light bulb comes on, right? Yeah. All right, that's all. Thanks, Ann.
What were the most common questions you were asked this summer?
It's like questions about the fire?
Yeah.
People wanted to know, really, of course, just things like how big, and a lot of it is about behavior. Not necessarily how big the fire was, how was the fire behaving? Because fires behave differently depending on different conditions that those fires are burning under. And Pete introduced some of that, the concept of really different kinds of fire in the forest. So I think behavior is important to present to.
And you can expand on the surface fires. The surface fires occur, is it 2 to 10 years naturally? They occur somewhere in there. Before all the problems began, before settlement and mismanagement of the forest. Every about 2 to 10 years from lightning strikes, sometimes the natives also, Native Americans would also set fires to help the forest with regeneration of the grasses. So surface fire is really a natural state here in the Southwest. We want surface fires, and really the restoration that we're trying to do is to restore it so that it can carry surface fires into the future. I mean, that's really like the ultimate goal of restoration, so that it becomes self-sustaining, basically. So also Ponderosa pine has adapted to it, like Pete was saying, you know, you have the very thick bark, and then also you also have cone drop from fire, from the heat. So this is something that we promote, that we want. Right now we're doing prescribed fires because we're trying to restore, and we're also doing thinning. to restore. Those are the two largest management applications that we're doing right now to restore the forest. And that's really simplifying it. I mean, there's a lot more going on. But it's really also to bring back the diversity of the forest. And like Pete was saying, the diversity of the understory is really critical for wildlife, and so when you have those really crowded areas, there's no understory. It doesn't get light. It's just dark. There's nothing under there. Animals can't really eat. They're just extremely unhealthy. And then also we have bark beetle coming in. And so because they're so unhealthy and there's so much competition for resources, bark beetles are killing the trees as well. So I think what we're trying to create is really that historic state, then what happened because of overgrazing, logging, and then how we're going to return the forest back to a healthy state, and that is happening and ongoing.
So can I ask you something? So given all these things that we've talked about, the forest used to be more open and had these surface fires, and now it's real dense and sometimes has severe fires. So the idea of restoration, like in the sense of painting or something, means to make the painting look exactly how it did when Leonardo da Vinci painted it. In ecological restoration, it's not the same thing because nature is alive. It's not something that can exactly be as it ever was before. But it has a similar meaning in the notion of trying to restore the natural processes that made it work, that it evolved with over very long periods of time to make it sustainable, in order to make it sustainable again. So how would you do that? What do you think you would do in these forests in order to try to reverse these changes? What do you say?
I agree, industry magic.
That approach hasn't been tried yet. You guys
All right, get the knife. We're doing some blood magic tonight.
there's a fair amount of money in it. If you can figure that out.
Ever Satan, we invoke thee, restore this forest to its former glory.
So, in a non-supernatural approach,
Perfectly natural to make a pentagram out of lamb's blood and a human sacrifice.
But
we'll talk about it later.
without using a supernatural approach, obviously what we're doing right now, control bins, thinning the forests, this just kind of allows for, obviously fires are natural. You want fire once in a while, like prescribed burns and everything, but it just allows for fires to be less severe, less damaging to the forest in general, to the ecosystem.
I mean, it's a pretty straightforward kind of thing in a way. The forest has become dense, we do thin. And thinning means cutting trees, but the word thinning particularly means cutting smaller trees. Not necessarily, actually it's the bigger and older ones that are really missing and that we would really like to have back. We don't have a timber industry the way that we once did. We don't want them just because we want to cut them down and make boards out of them, but because we want our forests to be there, to be our watershed, to be the habitat for wildlife, for recreation, and everything else. And then reintroducing fire, but in a controlled way, so that, like you're all familiar with the burns that we have around town in the fall, and they produce smoke, and it can be annoying, but they are aimed at trying to restore that healthy component of the forest. So if you think about this tree that had all these fire scars and then had this huge gap, that if we can once again start seeing it have some fires, those other fires would help perpetuate the forest, basically, and help keep it from burning down. And there's other things that can be done at times, like seeding with native species. Sometimes our native understory plants aren't there anymore, or they can't respond really well. So we might go collect seeds from native grasses or shrubs and seed those. There might be ways of thinking about climate change, because climate is projected to get warmer. If our forests stay really dense and full of fuels that can burn up, that's not a really good future in conjunction with a warming climate. If we can restore the more open forest with less fuels, the ability of fire to pass through the understory, and not just fire, but there's other important disturbances like bark beetles, these small insects that kill trees.